thank you so much. And it was astonishing to me to wake up. I think it was about 3:30 this morning Mountain posting. But one of the things that struck my attention is obviously on the 10th, I had posted on my hot headlines for the alert for my new Empire Beneath the Ice trailer talking about what's going on in the Antarctica. And by the way, thanks to JD, who did an amazing job on that. But what I said here was interesting. This is a must-read book, as it will soon dominate the headlines of the world, leading us to the greatest deception in the history of mankind. Now, I wrote that on the 10th, okay? Now, I want to share something. I don't pretend to have all the answers. I just basically am trying to walk out what God gives to me. And again, there are people that want to challenge that on every blog that's out there. But let me share this. Before going on the air tonight, I got an email from Brian, okay, who lives in Australia. And the March-June period of 2015, he was given a very astonishing word on the future of Australia. Now, I'll excerpt this, and then I'm going to go into full-bore, meltdown mode on this. He's saying this: the invasion comes in from the south. Most people would think from the north. He's talking about the invasion of Australia. History tells us about Darwin being struck from the north, meaning Australia. Antarctica is the key. The country who really controls it will have it as a base. Now, I asked I asked Brian in an email, sorry about that, Brian, if he had ever read anything about Antarctica, was familiar with my work in any way, shape, or form, and he said no. What prompted him pretty much to send me the email were the headlines on my website today. And then just within the Jeremy, who lives in New Zealand, but he's headed to Australia, basically just sent me a new article. The fact is, Antarctica, concern over scientific research funding casts dark shadow over the future of Australia's share. And Australia was one of the original 12, I think, signatories to the treaty down there. But let's fast forward now. It's my contention, Doug, and I've been on talk radio 25 years, I think, off and on, either as a host or as a guest. I've done a lot of investigating in this. The first time I even broached Antarctica, it was in my book, Genetic Armageddon, and I think that was close to 15 years ago. In the new book, Empire Beneath the Ice, the reason this is critical is there is no human way that book could have been printed at the time it was released. I think we started last year, close to December. And now the headlines are really echoing the very importance, relevance, and concern and unusual events that are taking place in Antarctica and in Australia. Now, what's fascinating, why this is even more relevant, the gentleman who is the main host on Hunting Hitler for the History Channel, Bob Baer, was quoted as saying he doesn't believe the election was fair. Now, remember, he is a CIA, and they say former intel asset, not at all. There is no such thing, and those of you in the agency know this is true. Once in, always in, unless you either die or escape to another planet or whatever. But the point is, and I'm not kidding about that, the point that's interesting to me, Doug, is that the whole Hunting Hitler series is probably one of the most well-funded and most, I think, one of the best productions in the world as to what really happened to Hitler. Now, it should be obvious to everyone who's reading my headlines that I'm posting, Tom Horn that he's posting on skywatchnews.com. You and I and Tom have had numerous 3-hour sessions on Hagman and Hagman, and we've been warning about AI, artificial intelligence. We've been warning about CRISPR, in essence, the easy way to edit genes. We've been warning about everything from super soldiers and giants, and even to the point where saying that when Michael Crichton, I remember doing this show with you about a year ago, actually you probably remember better than I do, but I said when Michael Crichton wrote Jurassic Park, and that was, close to 15 years ago, the idea of cloning dinosaurs was in fantasy. But now everybody from Russia, China, everyone in the world with any money and any concern of being left behind is doing three very, I would say this, beyond the days of Noah undertakings. The first is basically combining human and animal DNA. This is going to be relevant to Antarctica in a minute. The second is super soldiers. And the third is the whole merging. And by the way, these have 100 or 3,000 points underneath them, but these are just the big three. The end of human beings as you know it, and the merging with machines that Ray Kurzweil basically termed singularity. And probably I would encourage everyone to read the classic work that was put out by Bill Joy, the founder of Sun Microsystems, when he wrote the quintessential forward-looking essay on why the future doesn't need us anymore. You remember talking about that, Doug, almost 10 years ago?
I do.
And so So here's what I want to say. The Antarctica is really important because based on my studies, and look, I can't know what I know unless people tell me. I have not been to the Antarctica, and for the record, I don't belong to any intelligence organization. As a matter of fact, that most of them hate my guts. But the point is, the living God said, surely he will do nothing except he reveals his secrets to his servants, the prophets. Now, I am not a prophet. I want to make that clear. I have never claimed to be in 9,000 hours and don't now. But the testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy. And God so loves his people. The thing that motivates myself and all the Christians that are coming up to hit the front lines, and God bless the younger generation, is the fact that there is truth being released now that has never been released in the history of the world. The events that are taking place in the heavens, the skies, the sun, moon, and stars, these are all things that the Scripture says are signs to the days we live in. And with the events that are taking place with cosmic ray bombardment, whether we've got a magna star taking place and cosmic ray storms, the splitting up in certain areas of the ice sheets in Antarctica calving. But I want to throw everybody back to 1513 in the Peary-Reese map, where the northern coast of Antarctica, which, by the way, was where New Schwabenland is reported to have been located, was totally void of ice. Now, that was in 1513. And, Doug, in all the years I've been researching, there's nothing new under the sun. Orwell, you quoted him in your article. Obviously, they who control the past determine the future, or they can lay out the future. Tim Alberino's marvelous work, and it is a marvelous work, on Sir Francis Bacon, and Atlantis Rising is really critical for people to understand that the advanced technology that we now have was detailed in great detail in the 1500s. Interestingly enough, Doug, about the same time as the Peary-Reese map, okay? Mm-hmm. Now, there are claims that Francis Bacon is Shakespeare. I'm not going to argue that tonight, but I will tell you this. He was not dumb. So there's been a priesthood, even a Plato in Timaeus that talks about Atlantis refers to it. And I want to make this clear. No place in my understanding, research, or talking with people that have security clearances that most people don't even believe exist, okay? They're touched upon and people automatically dismiss it. But the Antarctic has always been a place of unusual habitation. When Admiral Byrd, and keep in mind, Admiral Byrd was the foremost polar, both South Pole and North Pole explorer of our time. This wasn't a flake. It wasn't a crackpot. And again, when he was tasked to go down in 1947 in Operation High Jump with 13 ships to seek out the Nazi bases, and it was to be a 2-year undertaking, it ended up being just several months because basically, even according to Russian video, not video, would have been filmed those days, but that's on video now. You can look it up on the internet. We got our butts kicked literally by flying saucers that came out of the water and came out from under the ice. Now, everybody fast forward to Roswell, New Mexico, and after 1947, everything happen. Now, Doug, you've been sharing with the, going back and rereading Empire Beneath the Ice, and I think it's critical for people to understand. Werner von Braun and others are on record as stating it wasn't that the Germans were any smarter than anybody, and these are their words, but they had help from the spirit world.
Yes.
Now,
yes.
That's critical.
It
that's
is.
critical. So,
yeah.
And as you were reading, Doug, or forgive me, rereading Empire Beneath the Ice, what is it that stood out to you the second time that you missed the first time? Maybe you didn't miss anything, but what was it that basically just smote you or provoked your thoughts and going, my goodness, now I see it, Lord?
Well, against the backdrop of, we'll say, Genesis 6 giants, which you wrote, against the backdrop of my understanding, my reading of the Bible, and against the backdrop of today's headlines that include, but of course is not limited to, things like the spirit cooking headlines, Buzz Aldrin having to be evacuated from the South Pole, Kerry visiting the South Pole, first highest person ever on election day. What struck me as really important is your work. Empire Beneath the Ice, in my view, had laid the foundation for the headlines of today. Now, folks, as hard as that might be to really understand what I'm saying here, I really hope you do. When you read Empire Beneath the Ice, and then you take the headlines of today that include even the most seemingly disjointed or disambiguated headlines, everything kind of points back to the affairs, activities of the Nazis. And what really got me is when I went to search some of the information, just to verify, through the National Archives, Steve, of Admiral Byrd's research, that information remains classified to this day. So his diaries, notes, journals. Okay. So I'm thinking, wait a minute, there's something here. So this book kind of, it fills a void that like no other book I've read with respect to the Nazis and with respect to the Nazi influence over the global shadow government today. And that kind of really hit me upside the head when I Sunday night, I was, right before I did Dave Hodges, I was thinking, man, this is really prescient for today's stuff. So that's kind of what hit me.
Well, I think even I'm surprised, and I know that sounds kind of disassociative, how I can be surprised, but here's the thing. Over the years, as I've written about this stuff, researched it, people have contacted me, and one of the most interesting contacts after doing Coast to Coast with George Norrie was the fact that I got contacted by the great-grandson of Admiral Dernitz, Vice Admiral, who actually became the Fuhrer when it was believed that the Fuhrer had been, committed suicide, which is total nonsense. And in Empire Beneath the Ice, as you know, the first chapters, I lay out the fact that Stalin didn't believe he died, Eisenhower didn't believe he died, the FBI, J. Edgar Hoover didn't believe he died, meaning Hitler, and they had too many eyewitnesses. And as you know, that bunch of FBI files was just released in the last several years. Now you ask yourself this, timing. Timing is the most critical event when it comes to prophecy. There comes a point when you've been preaching, teaching, proclaiming, for those who are prophets, prophesying, for those who are watchmen, warning that these days are coming, and then all of a sudden they come. And let me share this. If it's true, and I believe it is, let me change the if to as. As it's true that the Hollywood elite are in bed, literally, I'm sure beyond where I care to go with this statement, with the intelligence and vice versa, with all their programs and scripts. And by the way, Doug, every single script that comes out of Hollywood is reviewed by the intelligence community. I don't know if you're aware of that.
Absolutely.
As it relates.
Yeah.
So that's a... Yeah,
John, just so for people who know, John Robertson, who is who's part of the Hagman Report team, former Hollywood insider, knows exactly what you're talking about. And the scripts that go, you're exactly right. I guess I didn't need more explanation, but the verification is there from our inside and sources. So yes, you're absolutely correct, Steve. And we're about a minute away from break.
Okay, and then when we come back, I'll carry on. But what's most interesting to me is the fact that God strategically places the information, whether people use it or not. It's the old adage, the Illuminati have to telegraph what they're going to do ahead of time. And Doug, everything centers at this point around Antarctica. Joe mentioned, you mentioned, we forget the most powerful religious people in the world, the Pope, that contemporary entity, and Kirill, who's the head of the Russian Orthodox Church, went down there. The entity in the White House went down there, meaning the abomination, and there are other world leaders, Kerry too, but there are so many secret liaisons that you and I don't know about that don't get published going on. And when we come back, remind me to talk about Greg Evenson's sources. God bless Greg. Everyone keep praying for him, because again, Greg passes information sometimes that he gets from people I don't know, I don't want to know, but let me share this. The concern in a certain branch of special operations, beyond JSOC, Joint Special Operations Command, beyond even where they're allowed to go. Well, again, I urged everyone to continue to pray for Greg Evenson. I'll tell you what, even though that guy can't get up and, let's say kick the devil's butt as he used to, because he's, getting therapy back to get on his legs, because obviously they had to amputate his toes, and that man's been hit with everything. And if there's anything called resiliency, bravery, and determination, yet a love for Jesus that's off the charts, I would tell you this: I have yet to meet anyone who has gone through what Greg Evenson has gone through that maintains his faith in Jesus. Now, understand this. He's a warrior, okay? He's not a wimp. And yet, do you know the number one thing that the people are talking to him about, that they're worried about? It's what's going on in Antarctica, okay? Now, for those of you who may not understand it, Patagonia literally means Bigfoot. And there, you look up Magellan, you look up his voyage, and there are woodcuts showing the size. And then all of the revisionist historians who are on the payroll of the intelligence community don't want the truth known. So I want to read something, Doug, out of the Word of God, because when I go on your show, I'm praying that those who have ears to hear will absolutely have a revelation. I've even seen Christians, I don't read all the negative stuff that's said about me, but claiming I'm a fearmonger and a fear porn purveyor. Now, here's what Hosea says. Jesus then, by their own claims to be, or claiming him as Savior, then Jesus was a liar, or Jesus didn't tell the truth. And since God is truth, and there is no shadow of turning or lying in him, then where's the problem? It's not with the truth or the presentation of truth, it's with the denial. Here it is, Hosea 4:5-7. Therefore shalt thou fall in the day, and the prophet shall also fall with thee in the night, and I will destroy thy mother. My people, God speaking, are destroyed for lack of knowledge, because I'm going to put the they have rejected knowledge. And then he says, but thou, because you have rejected knowledge, I'm also going to reject you, that you shall be no priest to me, seeing you have forgotten the law of thy God. I will also forget thy children. Now, if there's ever a reason, I believe in something called substitute reality, okay? You can call it virtual reality, or you could call it reality avoidance disorder. I remember, I don't know how many years ago, I'm probably dating myself, but, a newer beatnik term is anything was very cool, it was rad. Do you remember that, R-A-D?
Oh, yeah.
Well, it was so rad that the reality was always avoided. And so now you've got a world, okay, a world that lives in a virtual world. They escape, and the only reason they can basically play in that world is because the power's on, they can still eat. Once the power's off and they can't eat, then all the video games and everything they've learned become irrelevant, and so do their lives. And I'm saying that not to condemn, but to tell them it's time to realize that there are things going on in the world that truly will affect you. Back to Greg Evenson's sources, and I won't identify their rank or where they're at, and some of them I only know rank and the proximity, but I don't know their names. I choose not to know names. Anybody that wants to know name, and I'm going to say this again, This is so critical. Who could have warned except the heart of a living, loving God that wants his people not to be taken in by the lies and by, if you will, the charade of hell, by the camouflage of evil entities. So here's the deal. Men's hearts are going to fail them for fear of looking after those things coming upon the earth. Well, I guess that means that God is a fear porn purveyor. I guess that God is, doesn't do anything except just to make people frightened. Now, of course, that's not true. What I want to say, Doug, is this tonight, too. When you're dealing with the Antarctica and some of the secret labs, one of the movies that nailed this